Now, there's all of these processes that we're discussing. What Jack Mezirow does is he talks about what all of that reflection is aimed at. So he talks about a lot more, but he also talks about the what. Okay, what in the world are we reflecting on? And he categorizes this in three ways. There's content, process, and premise. If we think about content, it's sort of looking at a transcript and saying, what actually occurred here, right? What are they saying? What words did they use? What words did I use? How did we interact with each other? What were the sort of foci that we had when we were having a discussion, so to speak? And process is more of what's going on at the meta level. Am I attached to something here? Is there anxiety that's playing out? Did the person react? Or did they respond? So more procedural ways of reflecting, or procedural objects to reflect on. And the third is the premise. This is the level of assumptions that guide our behaviors. So our underlying assumption about the world, one might be, and we go back to our discussion about authority, how much do I get a say in all of this? So if you go to a doctor, for instance, think about how many times you have ever sought a second opinion, right? A second opinion is saying to authority that I'm not quite sure if even though you've got all the education in the world and you've got the diploma on the wall, I'm not quite sure that I believe fully that this is reality. So I'm going to go and seek a different opinion. These are all really strong preferences that we have that come from our relationship with reality and authority and guide our decisions along the way. And we know that having a second opinion is usually pretty helpful. Now, there are also three different ways of looking at objects and reflecting on them. And these are offered by, so these are Mezirow's. And then you have Brookfield. So Stephen Brookfield. And Stephen Brookfield talks about three different things that you can look at that maybe we call them levels of assumptions, right? So you've got descriptive assumptions, prescriptive assumptions, and paradigmatic. Just think paradigm. The descriptive level of assumption that we look at is basically how we describe the story. It's the words that we use, very similar to content reflection. It not only includes the words that we use, but it includes where we've censored ourselves in our story, what we chose to say, how far back in time we begin our story, how we situate ourselves as a protagonist, who the antagonist is, and so on and so forth. Story is one effective way of doing this, but just listening to the way that somebody describes a situation can tell you a lot about their assumptions around the situation. And of course, we begin with ourselves. If I asked you to tell a story about yourself, you might begin at childhood, or you might begin last week. You can also begin with your great-great-grandfather and pulling in the importance of culture. All of this is how you describe the world. And so these lead to really important hints about your assumptions. The second level is prescriptive level of assumptions. And that level of assumptions looks at the way that you feel things should happen. So like a doctor would prescribe a medicine, you prescribe a certain way of behaving and being and interacting in a certain situation based on your past experience. So these are called prescriptive assumptions. One great hint of when prescriptive assumptions are available is when you hear the word should. I should do this, or it's as if I should do this. So there's lots of shoulds, right? In any given situation, there might be a few different ways of doing things. Or if you ask certain philosophers, there's an infinite ways of going about working through a conflict or an opportunity that you're trying to develop innovation around. But looking at the should, right, is very similar to your premise assumptions. Now there's paradigmatic assumptions, and this level of assumptions is your core beliefs. And you hold these beliefs to be so core that you wouldn't even view them as assumptions. They simply are. So it's very difficult for people to get to that level of paradigmatic reflection because it's just like the air they breathe, the water that they drink. It's just inherent to who they are. And yet, these are assumptions that we can reflect on. So what we've done in this video is we've gone back and looked at learning from experience. You might think about, if you take a transformation that you feel you've experienced in life, asking yourself, what did I focus on? Who did I include in the discussion? Was it genuine? Was it formal or informal? How much was I reflecting on action and how much was I reflecting in action? And if you like to think about what to reflect on, one of the questions you can ask yourself is just closing your eyes and thinking back to a time where you felt stuck in life. Or perhaps you feel stuck right now. So what is that stuckness? How would you describe it? What story would you shape around it? What do you feel should be happening? Where do those assumptions come from? There's a lot to work with here, and it gets even deeper in my next video.